All right, here we are with our last but by no means least speaker of this session. Interestingly, we were just talking in the last one about flavor, and here we are with fermentation, a flavor revolution for plant proteins. So, Celia, over to you to talk more about that.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. And I'm super excited to be here today and talk to you some of the things that we are doing with plant proteins and how actually fermentation can bring in some new possibilities and really help to make impact and to accelerate the adoption from the market for plant proteins. About me, I'm a research director in DefTech, and my background is actually very much related to sensory perception or sort of molecules behind sensory perception. So this topic is really, really close to my heart, and I'm really, really happy to share it today with you. But before I move into the content, a few words about TFTAC. TFTAC is a privately owned research organization. We are located in Tallinn, in Estonia, and we are really working to accelerate innovation in food and biotechnology fields. We have experience in fermentation for more than 20 years. Actually, the name TFTAC stands for Center of Food and Fermentation Technologies. And for recent 7 years, we have very much been focused on new complementary protein sources for sustainable food production. We have around 100 employees, and we actually work together with universities, research organizations, and different industrial partners all around the world. And when talking about plant proteins, so located here in Estonia, we are very much interested in Nordic crops. So we do work a lot with different legumes, also oat, but today I'm more focusing on the legume-based proteins. And why legume-based proteins are important is that they do have different technological, economical, and environmental benefits, which I'm not going to go too much in detail. But I think we all know that the market of plant-based products is not growing or increasing in a rate that we would all like to. And from one side, it's price and cost-related things, but also it comes down to the sensory properties. So I would say that the off-flavor related challenges are one of the things that we really need to solve to have that kind of products really successful on the market. And today, as I'm going to say, what are the possibilities with fermentation, and my focus is really in off flavors, then actually it can come with other different benefits. So also like reducing anti-nutritional factors and help to improve some of the technofunctional limitations that legume-based proteins might have. And when I talk about anti-nutritional factors, so besides different like saponins or different anti-nutrients itself, we are also talking about raffinose type sugars that are really causing some discomfort to a lot of people in the population. And it's also a challenge that we need to address. But I want to give some brief background to where we started with plant proteins. So we, as a research institute, we work with protein extraction technologies, but we have been working a lot also with companies who are producing meat and dairy alternatives. So we have played a lot with different commercial protein isolates, protein concentrates, so different protein ingredients. And we really saw that even if we work, for example, with pea proteins, the variation between different producers is really, really large. And the same goes with all the other protein sources as well. But pea protein is really gaining the momentum in the market, and there are a lot of different pea proteins out there, but they do have drastic differences. And I just put here a graph where we can see the bitterness perception of different plant proteins. And bitterness, I would say, is one of the key attributes that we also focus when building technologies to improve the sensory properties. And we can really see that it can vary for different pea, oats, faba bean, and the last yellow ones are different, less common protein sources that we worked for this specific study. But what's really interesting or challenging about the bitterness is that, of course, sensory perception is always very individual. So there are a lot of individual differences between people. So it's really hard to get like quantitative, reliable data. But we really saw that bitterness is a real challenge on its own. So when we were doing our sensory testing, there were a lot of arguments between the panelists, even if they were all well-trained panelists. And what we understood was that bitterness is something that people really have drastically different physiological sensitivity. And we looked more into different bitter-causing molecules. And as we were interested in plant proteins, especially pea and oat, we looked what are the components behind that. And we also included in our study like linoleic and linolenic acid, which are the fatty acids that give to oat, but also to legumes, partially some bitterness. And we actually really saw that when some more common bitter components, let's say for tryptophan, for example, bitter amino acid, the fluctuation is much smaller. But when we look actually those bitter tasting fatty acids, we can see from the red bar that there were trained assessors who evaluated the samples with the bitterness level 1. And at the same time, there were assessors evaluating it with 8 and 9. So it's really hard to get meaningful data out of it. And we actually also wanted to know how it all reflects to the consumer perception. And actually, we saw the similar thing, that the bitterness in pea flour was very much perceived by most of the consumers. But when we look at the blue bars, which is the bitterness of oat flour, we can see that the majority of people actually evaluate it or score it with 0, 1, 2, and there are only few people who recognize bitterness. But what we learned from that is that when we work with bitter tasting ingredients, products, we have to be sure to select our sensory panelists in a way that they can really recognize the bitterness, and we know that they can bring value, because if we want to remove the bitterness, we have to start working with panel who actually is capable of recognizing the bitterness. So that was a good learning. And coming from the bitterness and taste perception, I move now to the aroma. So working also with different ingredients, and we also understood that they all smell and basically all the aroma molecules through our mouth as well are coming very differently. And actually, even if we talk about pea proteins, then eventually some of the ingredients actually didn't have any pea-like taste or aroma at all. So we were really wanting to see what are the key molecules. So this is always the start. Then we can see how we can rid of it. So we have to know what we are fighting with. And showing some of the results of the study that we made, where we actually characterized and mapped 5 different commercially available pea protein products. And what we really saw there was that they differed a lot. So I already talked about bitterness and astringency that you can also see from this graph, that the values are really, really different. But what was also interesting was that for some of the pea preparation products, the aroma of green peas and pea pods and peony notes were very dominant. But for some of the commercial ingredients, we really didn't recognize pea almost at all, because they had different dominating attributes like sulfury notes or even honey-like sweet notes. And we combined all the sensory profiling with gas chromatographic data using olfactometry, so really understanding what are the key molecules that are behind every sensory attribute. And we really saw that when we talk bitterness, then we have specific tastants that we have to focus on. And in terms of aroma profile, so we identified the green peas, green peppers. This is very much coming from different methoxypyrazines. And the thing with methoxypyrazines is that they are really present in really, really low concentrations. So they are quite hardly detectable with GCMS, but they have also very, very low water thresholds, meaning that we can actually perceive them very well in the matrices. So these are one of the class of very important molecules when we talk about off flavors in pea protein. I guess the most known or famous molecule regarding off flavors in different plant-based materials is the hexanal, and also some other aldehydes, but hexanal is the main one that everybody are looking into when wanting to see if we manage to create some change or some reduction. So hexanal and some other aldehydes, they are responsible for more grassy type of green notes. And then those unsaturated aldehydes that really have like cucumber and fatty and that kind of side notes. And those aldehydes, of course, they are all generated from different fatty acids. But very interesting, we also saw 2 very dominating molecules in some of the preparations. So one was really honey-like, beta-damascenone, and some sulfurous notes in some sample. So this is like really important to understand what are the molecules, how they are generated throughout the process, and how we can really target the reduction of these molecules. Which will bring me now to the fermentation. So fermentation really a really ancient technology and has been used mainly for shelf life improvement reasons, but nowadays getting more and more attention when we talk about complementary proteins and new sustainable food technologies. And although we are gaining all the time more and more knowledge, I would say that there is still a lot to discover, and this is something that we are also doing in every day basis. And when we look what fermentation can do, so the potential of reducing different anti-nutritional factors, I have listed quite a few here, and we have already started testing with many of them. The other thing is that fermentation can also introduce some changes in protein and amino acids, which eventually will affect the digestibility of these proteins, but also with enhanced amino acid profile, meaning that we can produce some specific essential amino acids with fermentation, so really balancing the amino acid profile. And of course, it also can modify technofunctionality through different changes that occur with the structures of proteins. And my key topic today, really fermentation to improve flavor and sensory properties. As said, it is one of the key things to really attract consumers. But there can be some extra effects more, so extended shelf life through antimicrobial effects and also different nutritional effects coming from postbiotics that can support really the gut health. A few time ago, we conducted a study where we used fermentation instead of classical chemical precipitation, meaning that we only didn't want to change the sensory properties of the proteins, but we also used the fermentation as a technological tool to precipitate proteins to bring down the pH. So we had that kind of setup where we tested different set of starter cultures, did some small-scale screening, and eventually selected two best combination that's for one case. So it's marked later like SC1, which actually acidified the fastest and had quite good sensory results. And the other combination of strains is called what we call SC2. This is actually the one that managed to have the biggest effect on the sensory properties. So we basically carried out in parallel fermentation aided protein isolate and chemical precipitated protein isolate. And we started with the comparison of the technological or process behavior, and we can see from here that yes, with acids, we could reach the pH with 5 minutes. When looking at our starter cultures that we selected from, in one case it was 4 hours, another case it was 6 hours. So it was all done in 5-liter scale. So meaning that in scaling up in industrial setup, this all has to be optimized. But what we saw was actually that the protein content of the isolates, the yield and the recovery, this remained all very, very similar with the control and also with fermentation-assisted precipitation-based protein isolates. And we also saw a small change in amino acid content, but our aim was actually not to hydrolyze proteins. So this is not something that we wanted to achieve. And when we look, what are the changes that we actually saw in terms of the sensory perception? So we can look from one side, the odor taste of pee and overall intensity of pee. And from the taste side, we can really see that in case of the blue bar, so the SC2, we can really see that we managed to reduce the off flavor or off aromas 2 times. And when we look the bitterness and the stringency that is presented here in the below in the lowest graphs, we can really see that for bitterness we got even better results. So with SC2 starter cultures, we managed to reduce the bitterness even 3 times. So these were really, really promising results. For astringency, we get some reduction, but this was rather minimal. And from the volatile part, when we look for fermentation, so at the beginning I showed you some chemical classes and components that we want to reduce. So one of the most crucial ones is the group of different aldehydes, or specifically these aldehydes that really have those greeny, green and earthy notes. And hexanal is one good molecule to present that class or chemical group, and we really saw the reduction with both of the starter cultures on the contents of those aldehydes. But at the same time, of course, with fermentation, some new aldehydes are produced, but actually those like acetoin and 2-methylbutanol, these molecules which are actually having kind of sweet and creamy and fruity notes. So they are even helping to mask or hide the green notes and bring out some positive elements. And we aimed to keep the technofunctional properties, so we didn't want to change the structure of the protein. Some changes, of course, still we could observe. So we saw a bit lower water solubility index, so it's probably due to the longer precipitation time, so which resulted in protein aggregation. But we also saw a increased water holding capacity, foaming capacity, and it's also very much reported that also emulsification is something that you could really change with that type of processes. So whenever the aim could be addressed more on the technofunctionality, there is room for optimization and improvement to really get the products with better technofunctional properties. And now we have moved on and we have isolated different strains from different plant-based materials, and we are currently in a process of screening different bacterial strains. And this is one of the example of, in case of pea protein, where we could really see that we have found a lot of strains who have managed successfully to reduce the content of some pyrazines, as mentioned at the beginning. So these molecules are present in really low quantities, but they do have a very major and large sensory impact, actually. And we can really see that the IPMP, which is very typical people like smelling molecule, that it is the one where we can see the biggest reduction. So the more blue, the more the lower was the concentration after fermentation of some strains. So these results are measured after 4 hours of fermentation. And beside the pyrazines, which is one of them key target class that we want to analyze and decrease with fermentation, we are also looking into the aldehydes. We are looking into different aldehyde components, but right now I'm just showing results for hexanal. And I think it's also very interesting that we can see this. There are 2 different samples. So one of them left side, this is KTF1. This is actually the sample where there are more carbohydrates inside. So this is more based on protein concentrates. And the sample on the right side, which is KTF2. So this is actually a sample of protein isolate. So you don't have too much carbon source available. And it's also like interesting to see here, basically that we have managed to reduce hexanal quite drastically. So the orange bars are basically the starting material, and the yellow one, which is like the negative reference, is the sample which is incubated with without adding any bacterial strains. But we have seen quite good reduction with different starter cultures. And one interesting thing that we can see from here is that when we look at this KTF2, the samples 13 and 14, where hexanal is actually 0, in case of the same strains with the sample KTF1, where we have more carbon source available, we actually saw that a lot of hexanal was produced, so really opposite. It's all indicating that actually these processes are not so simple, so easy, so you really need to optimize. You need to optimize the starting material, the conditions, but there is a very good opportunity to gain very good results with fermentation. And so this is what we are currently working with. We are right now, when screening the strains, we are really targeting the off-flavor reduction and the specific volatile molecules, but we are also very much looking into different bitter molecules to understand a bit what was the reason behind, or what was how we actually could reduce the bitterness. So what was it in the molecular level? So what did we manage to break down? And we really see that there is potential for fermentation for the sensory profile development. But together with that, it could help to bring like green processing, better shelf life and process quality control, different nutritional benefits, and of course, different targeted techno functionalities. So thank you. That was all from my side, and I'm open for questions now.
Thank you, Zili. I'm going to start with a question from within our audience, based on curiosity, apparently. On the subject of the sort of charts graph you shared around bitterness, someone asked, Catherine asked, how does animal meat, do you know, compare, for example, beef, compare on this sort of bitterness scale?
I think it's a good question, but I would say that we haven't looked into it, so it's a good idea. But I think in general, in meat, like animal-based meat, bitterness is not something that is very highly perceivable. And I also think that maybe we cannot look into that bitterness, not in a way that what is the bitterness of beef, but I guess that different parts of the animal could also have different bitterness value. But I would rather say that it's usually not considered an issue in terms of animal-based meat.
Okay, fair enough. Another question from the audience here just coming in. If I may ask, why was the pea flour centrifuged for the SC1 and SC2 fermented samples?
I think in the process, the thing is that we did it a lab scale process. So the aim was to precipitate or to concentrate or separate the water from the protein, or at the first step to separate the protein from the starchy material. So it's just a lab scale process, what you would do usually in the industry using some decantering or other equipment.
Okay. And just to sort of bring us out to close as we roll into the lunchtime, how can kind of understanding the key volatile compounds and other elements kind of help target kind of flavor in the future? What's next? Where does this go? How do you use this to target that flavor modulation in the future?
Yeah, so I think there are different perspectives. One of the things is that when we know these molecules, when we talk about fermentation, then we can understand what kind of pathways are we looking for, so what kind of strains we want to use. But it goes even beyond the fermentation, because if we know the molecules, then we can track back in which step of the process they are generated, and we can actually even go back to looking into different crop varieties, which is also a very interesting topic. So a lot of research and attention is also going there, that to understand which are actually the crop varieties that already contain all these non-desirable molecules in lower concentrations.
Sure. And I'll sneak one more question in because we've got a late arrival in the audience questions. What are your thoughts about the biomass single cell protein fermentation and relationship to flavors and bitterness?
Yeah. So regarding to, I think that the biomass fermented proteins in general, they do have a much milder flavor profile, but I would say that bitterness is an issue in there as well. And if we talk about biomass-based fermentation, so one of the major bitterness source is actually coming from the fatty acids. I also showed in one of the first graphs that some fatty acids are really, really bitter. And I think some bitterness related issues are actually also present in the biomass fermented proteins as well.
Thank you for that. Right, we're going to roll into lunchtime. Silly, thank you so much for being here with us today and giving us that really interesting presentation. Just a couple of quick announcements about the break. We're on a networking break now until 1:20 when we'll be returning with our next speakers. During that time, there will be a session on stage 1 by Dr. Kelsey Kanyak of this. So do pop over there if you'd like. Otherwise, do make sure that you use the platform, go and see the event partners, exhibitors, other attendees, our speakers from this morning if you have further questions that we haven't had time to get to, or more detailed questions. As I say, we'll be back at 1:20. Until then, thank you again, Silly, and we'll see you shortly.
Thank you.